The old gas station sat on the edge of town like a forgotten landmark, its paint peeling, the single pump island looking lonely under the vast sky. Elias had run it for 30 years, a quiet man in a faded cap and work-worn hands. He wasn't imposing, nor loud. He just was. Most folks in Harmony knew him, knew he kept to himself, filled their tanks, and offered a nod or a quiet word. They saw a man winding down, an echo of a simpler time. They didn't see the stillness in his eyes, the kind you only found in places where the air itself held tension, or the economy of movement that spoke of a body trained to efficiency, not age. His routine was as predictable as the sunrise. Open up before dawn, coffee brewing, the smell mingling with gasoline and dust. Check the stock, clean the pump area, wait for the first sleepy commuters. It was a peaceful existence, a stark contrast to the life that had shaped him decades ago, a life he kept locked away like old war medals in a dusty box. He wanted quiet now. He thought he had earned it. Harmony wasn't a town that saw much excitement, or much trouble, which was just how Elias liked it. There were rumors, of course. Talk of a new group rolling into the area, making their presence known in nearby towns, pushing their way in. A motorcycle club, they called themselves, though their activities went far beyond riding bikes. Protection rackets, petty crime, pushing around anyone who didn't fall in line. Elias heard the whispers, saw the occasional unfamiliar face that lingered a moment too long, but he paid them no mind. Trouble found you if you looked for it. He wasn't looking. One sweltering afternoon, the quiet evaporated. The rumble started low in the distance, a sound that grew quickly into a thunderous roar. A half-dozen motorcycles, heavy cruisers customized to look as menacing as their riders, peeled off the main highway and pulled into the gas station lot. They were loud, draped in leather and patches, engines spitting and snarling as they idled. Elias watched from the shade of the overhang, his expression unreadable. The lead bike, a chromed-out beast, pulled directly in front of the single pump, blocking it entirely. The rider, a burly man with a scowling face and a patch that read Viper, killed his engine and dismounted slowly, surveying the station with an air of ownership that made Elias's gut clench with a familiar, long-dormant tension. Two other bikers pulled up just behind him, effectively boxing in the pump. The remaining three fanned out across the small lot, blocking the entrance and exit, their eyes scanning, making sure no one else could get in or out. A young woman in a beat-up sedan, already waiting to fill her tank before they arrived, honked tentatively. Viper turned his head, his eyes narrowing. "What do you want, lady?" he growled, his voice a rough rumble like his engine. I just need gas," she stammered, her voice trembling slightly. Viper laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. His companions chuckled with him. "Can't you see we're using the pump?" "But you're not. Your bike is just sitting there." Viper took a step towards her car. "Listen, sweetheart. This is our spot now. You can wait, or you can find gas somewhere else." Elias stepped out from under the overhang, moving with that same quiet efficiency. He stopped a few feet away, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. "Excuse me," he said, his voice mild but clear. "That young lady was here first. The pump is for customers needing fuel." Viper turned his attention to Elias, his scowl deepening into a sneer. He took in the faded cap, the slight stoop in Elias's shoulders, the unassuming presence. He saw an easy target. "Well, looky here," Viper said, addressing his crew without taking his eyes off Elias. "Looks like the old man thinks he runs this place." Another biker, younger and twitchier, snickered. "He probably needs a nap." Viper took a step closer to Elias, puffing out his chest. He was easily twice Elias's width and a foot taller. "All right, Grandpa," Viper said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Why don't you just shuffle on back inside and let the adults handle things? Unless you want to learn some respect." Elias didn't move. His gaze was steady, meeting Viper's arrogant stare without flinching. "Respect," Elias said softly. "Respect is earned, son. Blocking the only pump and harassing customers isn't earning it." Viper's face contorted in anger. He clearly wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered so insignificant. "You listen here, old-timer," he snarled, reaching out a hand to shove Elias. "I don't know who you think you are, but you're about to find out who we are." As Viper's hand came forward, Elias moved. It wasn't a large movement, not flashy or dramatic. It was fluid, incredibly fast, and devastatingly precise. He shifted his weight slightly, deflecting the shove with a minimal touch, and simultaneously his other hand shot out, not punching, but striking a nerve cluster on Viper's wrist with the edge of his palm. Viper gasped, the shove losing all force as a jolt of sudden, intense pain shot up his arm. Before he could fully register the pain, Elias's hand clamped down on his forearm, just below the elbow, and twisted. Again, not a brute force move, but a leverage point, a specific joint lock applied with perfect timing. Viper cried out, a yelp of agony that cut through the idling engines. He was off balance, doubled over, his face pale. Elias didn't let go. He maintained the pressure, keeping Viper locked and incapacitated. The other bikers froze for a split second, stunned by the speed and effectiveness of the old man's counter. Then they moved. The younger one who had snickered lunged forward. Elias didn't look away from the struggling Viper. He simply spoke, his voice still calm, but carrying a new, chillingly authoritative tone. "Stop." The word wasn't shouted, but it had the weight of command, of absolute certainty behind it. The biker paused, halfway through his lunge, caught off guard by the tone more than the word itself. Elias then added, addressing all of them, his grip still firm on Viper's arm, "You want to fight? Fine. But not here." Not with civilians present. His eyes, no longer just steady, seemed to sharpen, focusing on each biker in turn. They held a depth, a cold calculating intelligence that was utterly foreign coming from the mild-mannered gas station owner. "Get your friend and get out of my lot. Now. Or this gets much, much worse for you. Believe me." The implied threat, delivered with such quiet conviction by the man who was currently holding their leader in a painful, inescapable lock, was more effective than any shout. The younger biker hesitated, glancing at Viper's pained face, then at Elias's unwavering gaze. He saw something in those eyes, something ancient and dangerous, that made the bravado drain out of him. "Viper," he stammered. "Let him go, man." Viper was still trying to break free, his face red with effort and pain. He broke my arm, you idiot." "He didn't break anything," Elias corrected calmly, adjusting the pressure slightly, causing Viper to whimper. "But I can. Or I can just make sure you can't use it for a week. Or maybe you'd prefer I introduce you to the pavement, head first." Elias's tone was flat, conversational, but the implied violence behind it was bone-chilling. The bikers exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't the reaction they expected. This wasn't just some old man. Okay, the younger biker said quickly. "We're going. Let him go." Elias held the lock for another moment, letting the pain and helplessness sink in. Then, with a final, sharp twist that made Viper cry out again, he released him. Viper stumbled back, clutching his arm, his face a mask of pain and humiliation. "Get out," Elias repeated, stepping back slightly, his stance balanced, ready. The bikers scrambled to help Viper, who was clearly injured, though perhaps not broken. They helped him onto the back of one of the other bikes. As they started their engines, Viper, his face contorted in rage, shouted over the roar. "You old bastard! You don't know who you just messed with. This ain't over. You hear me? It's far from over. We're coming back for you." Elias watched them go, the thunder of their engines receding down the highway. He felt the familiar, cold calm settle over him, the one that came before a storm, not after. He knew Viper wasn't just blowing smoke. They would be back. And they would bring more. The young woman in the sedan slowly lowered her window. Her eyes were wide with shock and awe. "Mr. Elias. Are you okay?" Elias turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "I'm just fine, miss. Go ahead and fill up. It's on the house." He walked back inside the station, the quiet returning, but it was a different kind of quiet now, charged with anticipation. He poured himself another cup of coffee, his hand steady. He looked at the dusty rotary phone on the counter, a relic from a bygone era. He hadn't used it for a very long time. Not for that. But things had changed. The peace was broken. And some habits, some skills, once learned, were never truly forgotten. He reached for the phone. He knew who he had to call. A number etched not into paper, but into memory, from a time when calls like this meant something entirely different. The word spread quickly through Harmony, carried on the wind and hushed conversations. The gas station owner, old man Elias, had stood down the Viper gang, injured their leader, and sent them running. Disbelief mingled with a flicker of hope in the eyes of the townspeople. The Vipers had been a growing shadow, their arrogance unchecked. Someone had finally pushed back. But the hope was fragile, quickly overshadowed by fear. Viper's threat hadn't been idle. The very next night, 2 cars parked near the gas station were vandalized, their tires slashed. A window was broken at the diner across the street. Subtle acts, designed to remind the town who was in charge and that any defiance would be met with consequences. They weren't just targeting Elias anymore. They were targeting Harmony. Elias wasn't surprised. This was how they operated. Test the boundaries, provoke a response, escalate until the target broke or was eliminated. He spent the next day not pumping gas, but watching. Observing the patterns of the few unfamiliar vehicles that cruised slowly through town, noting faces, license plates, timings. He was gathering intelligence, a process as natural to him as breathing, muscle memory kicking in after decades. He also made that call. The rotary phone clicked and whirred. He dialed a number, a long-distance sequence he hadn't used in nearly 40 years. It rang for a long time. Just as he thought it would go to some disconnected signal, a voice answered. Gravelly, cautious. "Yeah? Frank? It's Elias." A long pause. Then, a choked sound, disbelief. "Elias? No, no way. Elias? Is that really you?" "It's me, Frank. Where the hell have you been? We thought you were gone, after the Kandar mission." "I've been quiet. Running a gas station." Frank Barco, Elias's former commanding officer, now retired somewhere in Arizona, let out a disbelieving laugh. "A gas station? You? All right, I'll bite. What do you need, Elias? You wouldn't call unless." "I need help, Frank. Got a situation here. Local bullies turning into a bigger problem. Looks like they're tied into something nasty. They're threatening the town." "My town?" Frank's tone sobered instantly. "Details?" Elias gave him the rundown, the bikers, Viper, the incident, the immediate retaliation. He spoke concisely, using the old shorthand they both understood. "Vipers, huh?" Frank mused. "Heard about them. Spreading out from the city. Nasty piece of work, their leadership. Might be more than just local thugs." "That's what I think," Elias confirmed. "They're too organized for just a random gang." "All right, Elias. Consider it handled. I'll make some calls. See who's still around, who owes me a favor." Give me 48 hours. Lay low until then, okay? Lay low isn't really my style, Frank. But I'll keep it contained. Thanks. Thank you, Elias. Good to hear your voice. Stay safe. Staying safe was a relative term now. Elias knew calling Frank was crossing a line he hadn't intended to cross again. It meant opening the box. It meant letting the past bleed into the present. But looking at the scared faces in the diner, hearing the nervous chatter at the grocery store, he knew he didn't have a choice. He couldn't let these thugs terrorize his town. The retaliation escalated over the next day. A small fire was set in the town park gazebo. A teenager who had witnessed the incident at the gas station was cornered after school and roughed up, given a message to keep his mouth shut. Fear was a weapon the Vipers wielded effectively. The town was beginning to feel choked by it. Then, a different kind of rumble reached Harmony. Not the loud, obnoxious roar of the Vipers, but a steady, purposeful hum. 3 large, well-maintained pickup trucks, all dark colors, pulled into the gas station lot late one evening. They parked neatly, deliberately. Out of them stepped a diverse group of men and women. Older, mostly, with an air of quiet competence that felt instantly familiar to Elias. One of them, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and close-cropped gray hair, walked directly towards him. Elias? Sergeant Major, she asked, a slight smile touching her lips. Captain Hayes, Elias replied, offering a rare smile back. Though it's just Elias now. Once a sergeant major, always a sergeant major, she said, extending a hand. Frank sent us. Says you got a situation. Looks like he pulled together a team, Elias said, looking past her at the others emerging from the trucks. He recognized faces he hadn't seen in decades, a former pilot, a communications specialist, a heavy weapons expert, a demolitions man, a medic. The old team, or enough of them to matter. They looked older, some bore scars, but the look in their eyes was the same, focused, capable, ready. The band's back together, Hayes confirmed. Frank said you never would have called unless it was serious. Brief us, Sergeant Major. They gathered in the back room of the gas station, maps of Harmony spread out on the worn table. Elias outlined the situation, detailing the Vipers' presence, their known hangouts, their methods of intimidation, and his suspicion that they were connected to something larger. The allies listened, their faces grim, occasionally asking sharp, pertinent questions. From what Frank pieced together, Hayes added, these Vipers are being used as street muscle by a larger organization. Looks like they're setting up a distribution hub here. Drugs, maybe worse. Explains the heavy response, the former demolitions man, Miller, grunted. Protecting their investment. They made a mistake, the medic, a calm woman named Doc Adams, stated flatly. They messed with his town. Elias nodded. My thoughts exactly. They want to be the shadow? Let's bring some light. But not just any light. Focused, directed light. He laid out his initial plan. It wasn't about brute force, not yet. It was about disruption. Gathering more definitive proof of their larger operation, hitting their logistics, sowing chaos within their ranks before a final confrontation. It was tactical, leveraging their specific skills. Hayes, with her strategic mind, refined the plan, adding layers of complexity and contingency. Miller pointed out potential weak points in local infrastructure the Vipers might rely on. The pilot, a quiet man named Ray, talked about surveillance from the air, using a drone he'd brought. Doc Adams focused on security, setting up a perimeter around the gas station, turning it into a temporary, unassuming command post. They think they can just roll in and take over, Elias said, tracing a finger on the map. They rely on fear and surprise. We take away the surprise. We turn their fear back on them. As they finalized the plan, a different kind of tension settled in the room. This wasn't fear, it was anticipation, focus. They were veterans, pulled back into the fight, not for glory or country this time, but for a quiet man's gas station and the town he called home. The stakes felt just as high. The safety of innocence. The principle that bullies shouldn't win. Outside, the town held its breath, unsure what the quiet after the storm truly meant. They didn't know help had arrived, guided by the steady hand of the old man at the gas station. Hey everyone! Before we dive deeper into Elias's plan and the fight for harmony, take a moment to tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. We love hearing from all over the world. And if you're enjoying the story so far, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. The Vipers, nursing their wounded pride and Viper's sore arm, were planning their own escalation. They saw Elias's initial defiance not as a sign of true strength, but as a fluke, an old man getting lucky. Their leader, Viper, was furious, his arrogance bruised worse than his wrist. He demanded retaliation, swift and brutal, to reassert their dominance. He didn't just want to teach Elias a lesson, he wanted to make an example of him, and the entire town. They also received a message from higher up the chain, their shadowy patrons. The brass was unhappy about the disruption, especially if it drew unwanted attention. They ordered the Vipers to secure the town, silence any resistance, and ensure their operation could proceed without interference. This added pressure made Viper even more volatile. Elias and his allies moved with practiced efficiency, operating primarily under the cover of darkness. Ray's drone provided aerial surveillance, mapping the Vipers' movements and hangouts. Doc Adams, posing as a new resident, gathered information from local chatter. Miller and another veteran, a communications expert named Shen, worked on disrupting the Vipers' ability to coordinate. Their first target was the motel on the edge of town, where the core group of Vipers was staying. Not a direct assault, but a campaign of minor, unsettling disruptions. Faulty fire alarms going off in the middle of the night, timed just right to prevent sleep. Mysterious power surges that fried electronic devices. Deliveries of bizarre items they didn't order. Small things, designed to fray nerves and create paranoia. Concurrently, Elias's allies used their network to feed disinformation into the local criminal underworld, suggesting the Vipers had angered a powerful, unknown entity. This created friction with other minor players and made the Vipers look less invincible. The Vipers reacted with predictable thuggishness. They trashed their motel rooms, suspecting the owner. They harassed the delivery drivers. They rode through town late at night, engines roaring, hoping to intimidate. Their actions became more erratic, driven by frustration rather than strategy. One afternoon, a group of Vipers rode past the gas station, slowing down, their eyes narrowed on Elias who was calmly wiping down a pump. They didn't stop, but the message was clear, they hadn't forgotten. That night, they decided on a bolder move. Their primary lookout post was an abandoned barn on a hill overlooking the highway into Harmony. It gave them a clear view of anyone approaching. Elias and two allies, moving like ghosts, infiltrated the barn. They bypassed the lookouts with ease, using skills honed in countless insertions behind enemy lines. They didn't harm the lookouts, simply incapacitated them temporarily and left them tied up with a note, "This is your warning. Leave Harmony." They then installed surveillance equipment, turning the Vipers' lookout into Elias's observation post. They also left a small, non-destructive surprise, a device designed to emit a high-pitched frequency only audible to younger ears, broadcasting intermittently from inside the barn. It would drive the younger Vipers crazy, making the location unbearable and causing arguments among them. When the Vipers discovered the note and the incapacitated lookouts, followed by the maddening sound, Viper was enraged. He saw it as a direct challenge, a taunt. His superiors were demanding results, demanding that Harmony be secured. He decided the time for subtle intimidation was over. He would bring in more men, heavier weapons, and crush the resistance, starting with the old man and his gas station. Information gathered by Hayes and the allies confirmed Elias's suspicions. The Vipers were expecting a large shipment, the key to their larger operation in the area, scheduled to pass through Harmony soon. Securing the town was paramount for them before the shipment arrived. This was the true source of their desperation and escalating violence. The stakes were now undeniable. This wasn't just about a parking spot anymore. It was about drug trafficking, perhaps worse, using Harmony as a base, threatening the lives and safety of everyone in town. Elias's initial, quiet defense had uncovered a rot that went deeper than anyone expected. Gathered again in the gas station back room, surrounded by maps and now technical equipment, Elias and his allies reviewed the intel. Hayes pointed to a convergence point on the map, a secluded old warehouse near the defunct train tracks. This looks like their probable meet-up and storage point for the shipment. It's defensible, off the beaten path. And far enough from town that they think they're safe, Miller added. This is it, then, Elias said, his voice calm, decisive. We hit them there. We stop the shipment, we take down their leadership, and we expose their network. Ray spoke up. Intel suggests Viper is bringing in extra muscle from outside the city for this. Professional enforcers. This won't be just beating up street thugs. We know, Elias said, meeting the eyes of each ally in turn. They have numbers, they have weapons. But we have training, we have coordination, and we have something they don't. We're fighting for something real. They're just fighting for profit and power. Doc Adams nodded. We're in, Sergeant Major. All the way. This isn't mandatory, Elias reminded them, though he knew it was just a formality. Each person in that room was there because they chose to be, because they still carried the code they had lived by for so long. We know the risks, Elias, Chen said. But you called. That's enough. A quiet understanding passed between them. They were a unit again, forged in circumstances far more dangerous than this, but with the same purpose. Protect the innocent, confront the aggressor, finish the mission. All right, Elias said, standing up, radiating quiet authority. Here's the plan. We leverage their weaknesses, we use the terrain, and we hit them when they least expect it. Meanwhile, Viper was growing increasingly frustrated. The disruptions continued, small but relentless. His men were jumpy. The high-pitched whine from the barn, which only some could hear, was causing fights. The local rumors about a hidden force working against them were undermining his authority. His superiors were pressing him for action and security. He decided on a show of force that couldn't be ignored. Not just vandalism this time. He would burn the gas station to the ground. With Elias inside, if possible. That would send a message. That would break the town's spirit. He gathered his reinforced crew, about 15 bikers and the half-dozen hired enforcers, hard-looking men with military haircuts and cold eyes. They would hit the gas station just before dawn, when the town was still asleep. What Viper didn't know was that Elias and his allies had anticipated this. Ray's drone had spotted the increased activity at the Viper's main hangout. Chen had intercepted coded communications suggesting a large movement. Elias knew the gas station was the symbolic heart of the resistance he represented. They would come for it. And Elias would be waiting. He had turned the gas station into a fortified position. Not a fortress, but a carefully prepared kill zone. Entrances were subtly booby-trapped with non-lethal but incapacitating devices. Lines of sight were established. Escape routes mapped. His allies were in position, unseen, surrounding the property. The night before the planned attack, Elias sat in the darkened station, the only light coming from the neon sign outside casting long shadows. He held a worn, leather-bound journal in his hands. Inside were names, dates, places. A history of a life lived on the edge, of sacrifices made, of people lost. He traced a name with his finger, a quiet acknowledgement of the cost of the path he had chosen, and the path he was now walking again. He wasn't the young man who had charged into danger without a second thought. Age had added weight, slowed his body, perhaps, but sharpened his mind and deepened his resolve. He felt the familiar calm before the storm, the clarity that came when the world narrowed to the immediate task, the immediate threat. Tell us your favorite part of the story so far in the comments. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed. We've got an incredible special story coming out tomorrow that you won't want to miss. As the first hint of gray lightened the eastern sky, the rumble returned. Louder this time, more purposeful. A convoy of motorcycles and a couple of vans approached the gas station. Viper was at the front, flanked by the hard-faced enforcers. They slowed as they neared, approaching with caution, but still radiating arrogance. "All right," Viper yelled, his voice rough. "Old man. Come on out. Time to pay up." Silence from the gas station. Viper grinned, a cruel flash of teeth. He's hiding. Or asleep. Either way, he gestured to his men. "Torch the place. Make sure nothing's left." As the bikers started to dismount, moving towards the station, the carefully laid trap sprung. Loud, disorienting air horns blared from hidden locations around the perimeter. Strobe lights, placed low and concealed, flickered violently, ruining their night vision and making it impossible to see clearly. Simultaneously, small, non-lethal sonic emitters activated, creating a cacophony of irritating noise that made communication difficult. Chaos erupted. The bikers, expecting a sleeping target, were thrown into confusion. Men stumbled, covering their ears, shielding their eyes. Viper roared orders, but his voice was lost in the din. From the darkness beyond the lights, Elias's allies moved. Not attacking head-on, but using the confusion to their advantage. Ray and Chen, armed with tasers and non-lethal restraint devices, targeted the men near the vans, securing them quickly before they could access heavier weapons. Miller, using his knowledge of demolitions but applying it non-destructively, deployed small, concussive charges that created loud bangs and vibrations, adding to the disorientation without causing injury. Doc Adams and others moved through the fringes, isolating and subduing individual bikers who were too disoriented to mount a proper defense. Elias wasn't in the initial trap perimeter. He was waiting, hidden in the shadows near the pump island, a place Viper was likely to gravitate towards, the source of his humiliation. He held a long, sturdy tire iron, balanced perfectly in his hands. Viper, fighting through the sensory overload, finally spotted Elias near the pumps. Rage overcoming his confusion, he charged, drawing a large hunting knife. "I'll gut you, old man." Elias didn't back away. He moved, not with speed, but with deceptive grace, using the pump island for cover. He parried Viper's wild thrusts with the tire iron, the metal clanging against the knife. Viper was strong, fueled by anger, but his movements were wide, telegraphed, lacking discipline. Elias was the opposite, calm, efficient, precise. He blocked, redirected, used small movements to make Viper overextend. He saw his opening. As Viper lunged, Elias stepped inside his guard, hooking the tire iron behind Viper's knee. He pulled, hard, combined with a sharp push to Viper's chest. Viper cried out as his leg gave way, sending him crashing to the ground. The knife skittered across the concrete. Before Viper could recover, Elias was on him, the tire iron pressed firmly against his throat. Viper struggled, clawing at the metal bar, his eyes wide with fear. "You came back," Elias said, his voice quiet, measured, contrasting sharply with the pandemonium around them. His allies were systematically neutralizing the remaining Vipers, the sounds of struggle muffled by the continuing noise. "I told you not to. You old," Viper gasped, struggling for air. "You think power comes from fear?" Elias continued, pressing slightly harder. "From taking what isn't yours? From hurting the weak?" He leaned closer, his face inches from Viper's terrified eyes. That's not power, son. That's just weakness hiding behind muscle and noise. True power, true respect, comes from protecting those who can't protect themselves. From standing your ground, even when you're outmatched. He looked around the chaotic gas station lot. His allies had finished their work. Bikers lay stunned or secured, the enforcers efficiently hog-tied near the vans. The sudden, violent noise and lights ceased, plunging the lot back into a tense pre-dawn quiet, punctuated only by groans and the distant sound of approaching sirens, called by Hayes using an anonymous burner phone. Viper stared at him, the arrogance completely gone, replaced by fear and confusion. He didn't understand how this seemingly frail old man had orchestrated this, how his formidable force had been so easily dismantled. Elias removed the tire iron from Viper's throat. He stood up slowly, looking down at the defeated gang leader. "You came here to make the station go dark," Elias said, his voice carrying in the sudden stillness. "But you just brought the light down on yourself." He stepped back as headlights pierced the dawn gloom, the first police cars arriving. Harmony's small police force, often outmatched and sometimes compromised, had hesitated to confront the Vipers directly. But with the gang neutralized, their arrival was swift. Elias and his allies had left no trace of their specific involvement, melting back into the shadows as the officers secured the scene, finding the large stash of drugs and illegal weapons in the vans. They had done what needed to be done. The Vipers were rounded up. Viper, their leader, was among them, bewildered and broken. The discovery of the drugs and weapons led to a much larger investigation, one that reached up the chain, exposing the criminal network that had been trying to sink its claws into Harmony. In the days that followed, relief washed over the town. The shadow was lifted. The fear dissipated, replaced by a sense of cautious hope. There was talk of the mysterious events at the gas station, of how the Vipers were somehow defeated and exposed. Some whispered about the old man, about the look in his eyes, about the speed of his hands. They didn't know the details, but they knew he was somehow at the center of it. Elias was back at the gas station the next day, coffee brewing, the pumps open. The damaged property was minor, easily fixable. His allies were gone, dispersed as quickly and quietly as they had arrived, back to their unassuming lives, their mission accomplished. They exchanged brief, knowing farewells, a silent acknowledgement of shared history and purpose. Captain Hayes gave him a final nod. "If you ever need anything, Sergeant Major. Anything at all." "Just peace, Captain," Elias replied. "Just peace." The young woman whose car had been blocked that first day came by, not for gas, but just to see him. "Mr. Elias," she said, her voice filled with genuine respect. "Thank you. For everything." "Just doing my job, miss," Elias said, giving her a warm smile. It was a different smile than before, lighter somehow. The town started to heal. Neighbors talked openly again, without looking over their shoulders. They organized cleanup efforts, fixing the minor damage the Vipers had caused. A sense of community, strengthened by the shared threat and the unexpected deliverance, began to bloom. Elias watched it all, from his quiet corner of the world. He still ran the gas station, still wore his faded cap. To the casual observer, he was still just an old man. But now, there was a depth in the town's respect for him, a quiet understanding that some people carried their strength not on their sleeves, but in their soul. He had brought the light to the darkness the Vipers tried to create. He had shown that true strength wasn't about size or intimidation, but about courage, skill, and an unwavering commitment to justice. The past was still there, a part of him, but now it wasn't just a burden or a memory. It was the foundation upon which he had stood to protect his home. He sat on the porch of the station after closing, watching the stars come out over Harmony. The quiet was back. But it felt different this time. It felt earned. He had his peace, but he knew that peace was something you sometimes had to fight for. And he was glad he still knew how to fight. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, and if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel.